welcome to another edition of TVJ's All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson-Miller. Special welcome to our viewers on onespotmedia.com. The nation, of course, now mourning former Prime Minister Edward Seaga, who died yesterday. Now, in today's program, we're going to be looking at various aspects of Mr. Seaga's life and work. Later on, we'll be talking about economy, finance, culture, as well as his work as a member of Parliament. And joining me will be former chairman of Life of Jamaica, now Sagicor Group, Danny Williams, also program manager at Jamaica National Commission of UNESCO, Dr. Maria Smith. First, though, we'll hear from Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Earlier this afternoon, I went to Jamaica House to speak with him. Now, I read that you first met Mr. Seaga when you were working at Vouch. Do you remember what's your first impression? Or that's not right?
I actually met him while I was at the University of the West Indies.
Oh, as a student?
As a student. Ed Bartlett, at the time, arranged for a group of students to meet with Mr. Seaga. And I met with him. I recall myself, Christopher Tufton, Ronald Robinson, former senator, and a few others. It was a very, obviously, life-changing experience for a youngster to meet with a former prime minister and to have audience with him. And we had a wide-ranging discussion from agriculture to foreign affairs.
Do you remember what your first impression of him was?
Well, you know, growing up in the 80s, the perception was created of Mr. Seaga as a very stern individual. But in meeting him, I was quite surprised. He was quite affable. He joked a lot. And he was not as inaccessible as the public persona and the public perception would have led you to believe.
You also obviously worked with him closely when you worked with him at Premium Group.
Right. So before I became employed to him at Premium Group, I was running a voluntary organization called Vouch, which was in his constituency in Fletcher's Land. And one day, out of the blue, he passed by and he visited the organization, and then he said to me, why don't you come and work with me? And that was the beginning of my political career.
Did you have any doubts at that time? Should I do this? Should I not do this?
This is what I wanted to do. I studied management and economics at the university, but I decided that I would go and do social work in communities, and that was an avenue to get into community work and get into the community. And he heard of my work in Fletcher's Land, and he came and thought that it would be good to have someone like me working in the political organization and in his business at the same time.
What was he like to work for?
You know, again, the perception of him being a hard taskmaster, I found it very easy to work with him. And he gave me quite a bit of latitude. But it was good as well because you ended up trying to do your best and to adhere to the highest standard. So for me, it was very beneficial in terms of developing my own self-discipline and developing a greater understanding of politics.
He said that initially your engagements were not really about politics, your first conversations, and that came later.
Well, our first engagements were not about representational politics, but national issues, and particularly as well community development issues. So actually he brought me into the political organization of the Jamaica Labour Party to deal with social investment. And I spent quite a bit of time working on small projects within the constituency and some larger ones as well, including the Denham Town Community Centre. And the concept of social investment was just coming into being. And he gave me that assignment to work on social investment. So,
whose idea was it, though, for you to go into representational politics? Did he push you, or?
You know, so I guess Mr. Seaga always knew that's what I wanted to do. So he never stood in my way. I found my way around the party. And then one day we were working on something together, and then he said to me, I hear you want to represent a constituency. Obviously, he would have known. The party officers would have told him, but I didn't tell him. So he mentioned to me that, yes, I hear you want to go and run a constituency. And of course, he supported me, and he had Babsy kind of oversee what was happening, and eventually, I was approved to run West Central St. Andrew. So he was like, a father who was giving his son the latitude to go and explore, but he was always there in the background supportive.
When you became Prime Minister, what did he say to you?
We had a long talk for the first time around when I became Prime Minister, and he was relating to me his own experience with Bustamante. And we had a long conversation. We spent about 2 hours. What I will share of that conversation is that he said when he was going into politics and he was going to become a minister and so forth, Buster held on to his hands and said to him, "Don't forget the poor." And he held on to my hands and said the same thing. Don't forget the poor.
And what's going through your mind at that point?
Well, firstly, there was almost a kind of conflict in my mind because the general perception of the country and Mr. Seaga would be his statement, "It takes cash to care." But people would not realize his profound love and care for the people of this country, for the poor people of the country, and that all he did and dedicated his life to was to the upliftment of the poor people of the country. And the discussion we had was that when I was taking over the leadership of the party, was that we must always remember that the party is the party of the working class, of the poor. The party is built on labor, of the labor struggles. That's what we represent.